understand how we even got to this point is to understand some of the background history. Starting with my son, who has high functioning autism with a history of multiple incidents of physical abuse and mental abuse, his downhill journey with Howard County began really during the 2015-2016 school year when the special education department ignored my complaint regarding his non-public placement. The Strawbridge School at that time, without my knowledge or consent, removed him from his high functioning class of 6 students and placed him in a classroom with one student who had significant challenges, and his native language was profanity. I started to notice behavior changes in him during the beginning of the school year, but I didn't really understand what was going on because the prior school year, he was just making such great strides, coming home with these big words and raising his hand, and he was answering questions. For him, that was great because he didn't start talking until he was 7. For him to really get engaged like that, that was like a huge accomplishment. But apparently his behaviors were an issue. The thing was, all the kids in that classroom had behavior challenges, but he was the only one who was just starting to get introduced to medication. Transitioning was always a struggle for him. At the beginning of the school year, I started to notice significant changes in his behavior that modeled property destruction and profanity, and he had never cursed a day in his life. So I asked the school about any changes that were going on, and they denied any changes. So about 5 months later, my son and I were chit-chatting about school and talking about his school day, and I was asking him some questions about some of the kids that I remembered in his class. He told me that there was only one student in his class, and he told me the student's name, and he said he curses too much. I was confused because we didn't normally talk about his day too much because he was often agitated, and if he didn't really want to talk about it, he wouldn't talk about it. So this was a really rare day that he just was very, talkative. When he told me that, my antennas went up because I noticed that, he had been cursing and he had never done it before. So this was new. So when I contacted the school, they told me there were no changes in his behavior. They had still not noticed anything. He was doing wonderful. I spoke with the psychiatrist at the school who would observe him in his classroom setting on a regular basis, and his social worker who took him out of the class every day for whatever sessions she had. They reported no change. Later, there was a new social worker that came on board. She wasn't aware that I guess I wasn't supposed to know about this change. And when I asked her about it, she actually told me, yeah, he's in a classroom with one other student. Oh, they're on the same level. They were not on the same level. So I contacted the special education department and informed them what was going on. We had an emergency IEP meeting, and that meeting was just insane. After that meeting, my son's teacher ended up quitting. The only student in his class was removed, and he was in this classroom all by himself. I was like, that's crazy. So I contacted the special education department and let them know, hey, we need to do something. We need to intervene because, this can't happen. The response I received was my concerns would be addressed at his next annual review, which was nearly 30 days away. That was crazy. It was incomprehensible that the special education department would allow a student to sit in a classroom by himself with no teacher, with no peers, and just his one-to-one aide. Clearly, the education piece he wouldn't be getting if there was no teacher, and social interaction was one of the goals on his IEP, but he had no peers. Meanwhile, his behaviors were becoming so escalated to the point where he was now demonstrating property destruction, and the profanity was off the chain. So I continued to try to get Howard County to intervene, and they did nothing. Just days before my son's annual review, he experienced his first hospitalization due to aggressive behaviors. I was really disheartened by that because this could have all been prevented if the special education department would have kicked in, but they didn't. That hospitalization followed 944 days of hospitalizations intermittently over the course of 3.5 years. And that did not include the days and sometimes weeks that he spent in the emergency room waiting for a bed. So his last hospitalization was 1 year and 6 days. And throughout all of his hospitalizations, I had heavily advocated for home and hospital and the special services, speech and OT, that he was entitled to. Home and hospital is a service that allows a teacher to come into the hospital and provide educational services. He was also eligible for speech and OT, and those services could also be provided in the hospital as well. Unfortunately, those services never started until his last hospitalization, and it's not even well documented that a teacher came in more than maybe 3 or 4 times. So once those significant behaviors began, there was really no school in the state of Maryland that could meet his needs. Either the school could accommodate his high functioning status, but could not accommodate his behaviors, or they could accommodate his behaviors, but the student population it served was not a good fit for him. So he remained in the hospital, and really the county did nothing. No meetings, nothing. There was not even a discussion about what the plan was going to be for him. I initiated an emergency IEP and let them know, hey, look, we need to do something to get him placed. I mean, he can't just sit in the hospital and rot away. No one really did anything, and I started looking for placements on my own. After thoroughly checking out all the schools in Maryland, I knew there were no schools that could meet his needs, so I started looking out of state. Finally, I found a school that I thought would really accommodate his needs. It was called the Bancroft School in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. And I was really excited about this school because they had statistics that claimed that they could improve behaviors by 60%. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. So Howard County gave me a lot of pushback, but ultimately, they did place my son at the Bancroft School in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. He was at that school for about 4 years. So to fast forward and bring you up to speed,